great discussion. I got a 10-minute sign. I thought I had 20 minutes. Okay. So we're going to accelerate through these next ones here. So planning for risks, issues, and decisions. I'm going to go straight to the slides here, but how do we anticipate what's going to happen and what might happen before we start? Faye, you want to start in on this one?
Sure. Since we got the 10-minute clock ticking, so I'm going to go straight to risk, because I think that is that's one thing that perhaps we don't know how to really do very well with majority. I mean, we can list a lot of the issues, and we can anticipate a lot of things, and a lot of times when we face with those issues, we know how to run, because everybody's passionate, they want to get it done, they want to get it fixed. But when it comes to risk, and for what I have observed through my project managers as well, is that to truly understand what the risk or potential risk could be, it requires almost like a crystal ball, right? So you have to take a look and actually think, going back to painting the picture, knowing what's the end, and then taking that crystal ball and kind of taking a look into what could be your roadblocks, what could be the problems that you never potentially anticipate could happen, and also open up and ask those questions of your team, your program, your project staff, whatever the case may be. They have something to contribute. Any little voice could actually be something huge that you have to think through. You have to anticipate. And I want to strike a little example going back to when I worked at CalPERS. There was some significant efforts when we have system downtime during the weekends, because we're trying to beef up the infrastructure for the buildings so that the environmentals are stable. So we had this one time planned for the weekend work. And when you're trying to corral almost 100 folks to kind of get the work done, everything has to be lined up pretty well, right? So, and the work that we were trying to do was to shut down the system, bring it back up, but there was the facility piece that was critical. The facility piece was to install a generator. So that's something that, they'll deliver it, truck gets here, deliver it, they install it. But what we learned a week before was that the generator got damaged as it was delivered. It actually was traveling to get to the CalPERS building, and under the I-5 Q Street bridge, it got shaved off the top. So the whole generator was damaged. And so there goes our weekend. But how did they not plan for that? Well, apparently through the discovery, when the delivery truck, they do actually measure the road and the top of the bridge. And what they didn't calculate was that not long ago they paved the road. And so that kind of lost a few inches, and then that shaved off the top of the generator. So that, all that planning, all that work that we went into it, kind of has to be postponed. All the weekends that folks actually planned around it, out the window. So those little things, something as simple as paving the road, needs to be taken into consideration. Now, I know the crystal ball is not going to tell you that, because we don't have that kind of crystal ball, but it goes back to really think through it, walk through the process, and understand and listen to the team that will provide that input to you, so that you can kind of think through that process. So you don't have to come up with it yourself as a project manager. So I just want to quickly highlight that.
That's great. And I'm going to quickly keep moving us through, because I don't want to just go to the last slide and read them all off. So I apologize. I asked for too much audience participation. We talked too much. Let's roll through it. Conducting stakeholder outreach. So getting in and talking about stakeholders. I think, Barbara, you've got some of the best experience with stakeholders, and talk about this a little bit.
So get to know your organization's culture. I think I already hit a little bit on this about when I talked about, your executive sponsor. How do they like to communicate? Your steering committee. What is the best way to to communicate with them? How do they want decisions? One of the things you need to make sure you can do is escalate issues as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So knowing how they want to be communicated with and how they process information, you want to know that right up front. You don't want to send them a 15-page white paper for them to work through if what they need is, 5 sentences of what the issue is. You've got to know what their taste is for information so that you can escalate quickly. Develop a plan to engage your stakeholders and get their buy-in. Start your change management, your organizational change management early. Know who your stakeholders are, know how you're going to work with them, develop your plan. At Fiscal, we have got multiple stakeholders. We've got an executive sponsor, we have a steering committee, but we also have departments in several waves. So we have our waves each have departments, and each of those departments have sponsors. Some of them have multiple sponsors. So for our Wave 1 departments right now, we have monthly sponsor meetings. We've already kicked off our Wave 2. So now we have monthly sponsor meetings with our Wave 2 departments where we actually, we're going out and we're meeting with those sponsors. We're taking reports to them on a monthly basis about where their individual department is and are they meeting their tasks. So you have to know who those departments, who are those people, and how are you going to communicate with them. And, reach out early. Make sure that you develop those relationships. Do you need to do what I call a road show, but in your own department? Do you need to do a road show? Do you need to go to your divisions? Or, do you have satellite offices where you need to take your project and do a road show? Kind of advertise your project. Here it is. We're coming. We're real. One of the things that I think stakeholders have the hardest time with is believing. Projects fail. People don't believe that you're really going to succeed. They don't believe you're real. You've got to convince your stakeholders, yeah, we're real, we're here, we're going to succeed, and we're going to come, and we're going to happen. So get out there and meet with them. Develop your roadshow, your advertisement, for lack of a better word, and go meet with your stakeholders. Let them know who you are. Make that face-to-face connection with them. Tell them what you're coming. Make sure they know how they can get a hold of you or whoever the appropriate person is. If you have a person that you want, a
15.
spokesperson that can answer questions for your change management office. Who is that person? Legislature is incredibly important if you have a big project. If you have an internally funded project that you're working through your department, maybe you don't have to engage the legislature directly. But if you have a large project and you have to engage them, who are your consultants? Who do you reach out to? Make sure you're reaching out to them. We do quarterly briefings with our legislature. We are not required to. We don't have a statute. We told them we would do it. We've done it. They appreciate it. They show up. We schedule the meetings. They show up. We take presentations, and we provide quarterly, actually very transparent, in-depth briefings, and they really appreciate that information. And don't forget your advocacy groups. Who can support you? Who can go out there? Do you have business users who are going to really benefit, who can go with you and help sort of support your project? Who are going to benefit from your project, who can help support you and help share your message and help get it out for you? A good example is our Wave 1 departments have already offered to help kind of support our Wave 2s and help us get the message out. We have quarterly forums that are open to any state employee, and we've already had some of our Wave 1 departments come and do our forums, share their experiences with other departments. So who are your advocates? How can you get them involved with your stakeholders? And understand, what their individual drivers again are. What do your individual groups of stakeholders need to know? What do they want to know? What do they need to know? Sometimes your stakeholders don't know what they need to know, so you need to know what they need to know so that you make sure you're communicating the information, the right information to them. Because sometimes they're not aware of what it is, and you need to make sure. I think that's really important, especially with escalation. I think sometimes when it comes to escalating issues, especially to your executive, up your executive chain, your executives don't know sometimes what they need to know. It's your job to make sure that you communicate and say, hey, here's an issue, and I need you to weigh in on it. I need you to pay attention to this, to weigh in on this, to give me your decision, your opinion, your direction, whatever it is, your support, your help, your backing. And so you need to know who your stakeholders are and need to know what they need to know and how you're going to get that to them.
Hey, thank you. So time check here. I thought we had 10. We've got, we have a few more minutes?
I forgot that you guys are done at 10 minutes till, correct?
I believe that's right, yeah. Now we've got 10.
No.
And you guys thought we were done, right? Oh, gosh, a little panicky up here for a second. Okay, let's keep moving through. Next, we're going to talk about governance model and establishing an effective model. So I'll turn this over to Jerry.
So many of you are not going to believe this, but I get to work in a lot of different states, and California has one of the better governance models. And so I know people kind of look at me like over their glasses and they say, but compared to other states, I think California has a better process in terms of what they expect in governance. And so I think, at the executive level, I think it's much better. It always can improve, but it's pretty good at the executive level. Certainly, you want to have your governance in before you have any issues. For the departments who don't have their governance there. But mostly at the executive level, most of your executives, not all, are used to working together, or at least appear that they're working together. Okay. I think where we have a hard time is at the operational level. And you have to do an assessment at the operational level of what kind of governance you need. And by that I mean, how are you going to handle data when it goes across? So you have to establish the right kind of groups to govern your project. It can be a wide variety of things. You have to make the assessment. Do I need a different governance model for how I'm going to control data? How does it get updated? Who owns it? Those kinds of things. I now have SOA services, and the services are a central service. Only one group might be testing it. Is every other group comfortable with that? So you have to set up your operational levels in those areas, even to the level of security. One thing that we found when we've been putting in governance is it's really hard to make people sit down and plan for governance and figure out what all the roles and responsibilities are and do the RACI matrix unless they have a real problem in front of them. And so I would tell you that if you're going to do a plan and if you're going to do something, make whatever they're doing real, not theoretical, and then take the real and go through it. Take the real together and do it that way. Otherwise, you lose attendance. People aren't willing to invest that much time in a general setup of governance. And so that's my job.
Great. Two more. I think we can make it here. Next is establishing engagement management procedures. Faye, you want to take this one?
Sure.
All right, thank you.
You can bring to the
I will. There we go.
So, getting engaged. These are the typical things that you would do. Setting up all the applicable management tools, establishing project management plans, setting up project meetings, etc., etc., etc. Right. So, but how do you get people engaged? How do you keep them informed? How do you share where you're going? It goes back to the first slide that we had. Is painting that picture and keep painting that picture and getting them motivated and getting them aware and be just as passionate as you are in going through the whole process, especially if your project is more than 2 years long. How do you keep that engagement going? And it is really important because everything it's all about not knowing where things are at, right? It is really reducing their stress level and taking it through the process, not only within your team, but the stakeholders. Your key program areas, folks that are using your system, and or any new modifications that you may be making. Recently, with one of the projects that we had, that we're starting up, and we didn't come to realization of how much rumor that's out there that we're modernizing the system. And so there's anxieties running all around. And so with road shows, then we're trying to reduce those fears, and that's getting that engagement going. And that's getting the folks to help you identify what are the key successful criteria that in order to make you complete with a big giant checklist versus just getting it done, right? So engagement is more than just these steps. It's thinking beyond the mechanics. It's actually looking at how to get folks involved. Don't exclude them, include them. And then that will help you set the pace of how you want the project to move forward.
And when we put this one together, it's a little bit of a laundry list of things that should be put in place by the time your vendor shows up. And it kind of ends up being that way because these are all the things that you don't want to have to figure out when you need them. You know, Jerry was saying that the governance model sometimes doesn't get figured out until you have a big problem. Same thing here, right? You start doing review owners. You don't want to start figuring out the review owners or the deliverable review process when the vendor hands you the first deliverable. Get that figured out when you have time, and then that way the process is established, everybody knows what they're doing, and what the roles and responsibilities are all pretty well defined. So this is a little bit of a laundry list. It's kind of intentional because that's the way the reality of this is on the engagement management procedures. Okay, our last one, and it's appropriately our last one because it's often the last thing that sometimes folks think about as they make the transition to the project starting off, is conducting and leveraging kickoff meetings. Are these best done as an afterthought, or or can these actually be fairly valuable? So,
So I'm going to argue that these can be very valuable. When we did Fiscal, we did a 2-stage procurement. So we spent 9 months with our vendor in the same building with us. When you're sharing a procurement with a vendor, there are very different rules about can you talk to them, can you not talk to them. We were one of the first projects to do it, so we actually started off with you can't even say hello in the hallway, you can't smile at them in the parking lot, you can't do anything. So we had to make a huge shift from you are very separate to we're one team. And so leveraging using your internal kickoff meetings, those kickoff meetings are a real opportunity to kind of build some enthusiasm with your team, really move them from that, hey, we've made it through the procurement, the kind of drudgery of a procurement, it's not the fun, kind of sexy part of a project, to we're going, this is it, it's real, we're moving on. And using that opportunity to kind of build enthusiasm, get you a chance to get out there and sort of, now we can publicize this, we can talk about what we're doing, we can, this is our chance to make it real to everybody. It's also your opportunity to kind of remind people, your own staff, what is the scope? What are we doing here? Again, going back to that, making sure we all know what the end state looks like. How are we going to control the scope? What is the schedule? What are your responsibilities as a state employee, as a member of the team? What is our governance model? How are we going to make decisions? How are we going to manage our contract? What are we doing for change management? Make sure that the team knows who the leadership team is. This is an opportunity to bring in your executive sponsor. Make sure that, they're there for your kickoff so that the team knows, who's in charge all the way up. It's a great opportunity to do some team building. We had initial kickoff, but then we also had some just sort of monthly meetings for the first few months where we actually did some fun team building, an opportunity for our team and the vendor team to get to know each other. But we started with just our own team getting to know each other. We were growing quickly those first few months where we were hiring a lot of people. So some good fun team building opportunities. And then you do that joint one. When we embedded our vendor staff, they sit side by side. they work together, they are equals, they're embedded in cubes right next to each other. And so our joint team kickoff is a joint team kickoff. They sit beside each other. The same sort of things, you know, we bring the project manager from the vendor side, the project manager from the state side up together. You know, make sure that you introduce them as, you know, here's the state manager, here's the equivalent, you know, here's from the vendor side. So everybody knows who the leadership is on both sides. You know, it's another opportunity again to go through, remind everybody again, what's the goal here? Where are we trying to get? But they're really an opportunity to just build the enthusiasm and remind people of their opportunity to build something here, to add value, and to be excited about it. So I think you can really, really use those as opportunities to excite people. And I just can't, I think we got a lot out of them. I really do. And I really think the kickoff's a very important way of bringing the teams together and getting people to know each other and just started getting off on a positive note.
Great. I think we're going to run into our timekeeper here in just a second, so we'll get to this slide and wrap this up. I'm sorry to cut off the participation. That was great. You come in these things, you never know what problem you're going to have. If you're going to be too quick or too long, and I actually would have preferred to have another hour to go through this because I love hearing your guys' experience and it's the whole point of these conferences, right? Get together and talk about what we've done. So thank you very much for participating. I apologize for having to cut it off. We have a few, we have these points summarized on some sheets that the guys in the back are handing out. And thank you, Barbara, Faye, and Jerry, for participating in this. Thank you very much.